Hello, Steve White, TrekBoy89 for Steve Arts 89. Well, I've already done 2 videos about the last Star Trek Strange New Worlds episode, What is Starfleet? Now, the first review I did was basically, this was an okay episode that had 3 in a row that resemble Star Trek. It's kind of surprising. It wasn't good, but it wasn't bad, so left it at that. Then I sort of actually looked at a bit more the aesthetics of the actual documentary that they showed and how bad it actually was, and it started to fall apart a little bit, but still, well, overall wasn't a bad episode because I felt the overall message was basically Starfleet is good. They weren't trashing Starfleet. But then I've seen other people talking about it actually being bad, and reading into the allegories quite deeply, particularly Jessie Gender, who, I mean, she's admittedly an anarchist and she's a sort of extremist transgender person, so I tend to not pay too much attention to some of her ideas of what things are, because she has a slightly skewed perspective, very biased perspective, so it's interesting to see her perspective sometimes, but yeah, so I didn't really pay much attention to it, but I'm seeing other people saying the same thing and pointing out that this episode and elements in other episodes are very right-wing and very conservative. And when you look at that, plus, for example, the prayer recently that Pike was praying when his girlfriend was sick, and just even the idea of someone in Star Trek's future who's intelligent and educated actually believing in religion and like getting down on his knees and praying. It's not a rational thing. Religion is not rational, and Star Trek is science fiction. And talk of evil, making the Gorn basically just villains, just evil, just othering them, and whereas the original series showed both sides of that story and showed them to be an intelligent race with political issues, who had basically been wronged by the Federation, and they were just reacting to that, not sort of bad evil monsters, which Star Trek's Strange New Worlds has reduced them and regressed and reduced them to that. So there are a bunch of worrying things, and someone else also pointed out this is the shortest episode of the season so far, only 40 minutes, suggesting that this was one of the episodes that was heavily edited, because we know that in order to get CBS's or Paramount's sale or takeover from Skydance, they had to jump through a lot of hoops, including editing Strange New Worlds. They couldn't reshoot anything apparently, but they edited out a lot of things that were a bit too woke. So the disturbing reality that Star Trek, which has always been a leftist show and very progressive, is now sort of owned by a studio run by allegedly a right-wing person, and all their anti-DEI speeches and guarantees and so forth. It does make you worried that Star Trek is eventually going to turn into Stargate or something, where it's just, Starfleet as military running around pushing conservative America and American agendas, which is kind of terrifying to think that it could be turned into that. Because I didn't realise, I was sort of celebrating, or I wanted Skydance to take over, because hopefully we get sort of a revision of how Star Trek is being made and, get rid of Kurtzman. But I didn't actually realise till late in the game that Skydance is actually very run by someone who's allegedly very right-wing, and that could be bad for Star Trek. And yeah, it kind of looks like that's sort of, there seems to be a tone in there. And I'm not sure if it's early enough to worry, but I do worry about Star Trek's future, because any new shows will probably be even more conservative. Now, I do think New Trek deliberately alienated the right wing, and what Star Trek always did in the past, which was smart, was they always were subtle with their messaging, and they used allegory, and they never directly sort of attacked anyone, but you could see the criticisms in the episodes, and people who weren't being alienated by being directly addressed, would sometimes see those stories and get those messages and literally provoked thoughts and open minds. That's one of the brilliant things about the original Star Trek. New Trek, they just came out and said, yeah, we're right-wing, we hate all left-wing people, we don't need Trump fans, and they literally said that. And they really made themselves a really easy target and alienated, some conservative people, which they could have, not done that. So I felt like that might be a concern, but it also may help Star Trek popularity-wise if they can find a balance where they're objective and humanist and show both sides of the story, so people from both sides can view the same issue and sort of come to an understanding. That's what Star Trek did so well. I'm hoping that's what we get. But the other issue is also there's no gay people in the show anymore. Discovery was really, really gay and had some really on-the-nose transgender messaging, which was just not realistic for that period. There's no way someone in the 32nd century would have to explain to a gay person what pronouns were, but they did it just as a lecture to the audience. So things like that did happen, and Star Trek, New Trek, and particularly Discovery, kind of are to blame for some of that. But I do worry that it'll go past going back to being balanced like it was to now being conservative. Because now there's no gay people in the show, and the only mention of one character might be bisexual, has just disappeared, and all the people are being sort of, coupled up in very conservative relationships and so forth. So that's kind of worrying. They had one trans guest, but unfortunately it was a trans actor who could not act, and it just looked bad. So I can kind of see where people are looking at Star Trek and going, yeah, that didn't work, we should fix that. But and I'm happy with going back to the centre, because I feel like they got very much to the left. Obviously. I don't mind them sort of going back to centre, but I do worry about them going to the other side and going to the right. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. I just had to comment on that for a minute, because I noticed people are suggesting that it's begun, and this episode is a sign of that. Because of how it relates to or does allegory to certain political things that are happening now, but I'm really not sure of those particular situations and if it really is doing an allegory of them, or if people are just reading into it, and if it's actually saying something about that circumstance or not. So I'm not really sure, but I do think Star Trek is going in that direction. We are seeing a lot of little signs, and it shows how much of a soulless IP milking thing Kurtzman is, that he did all this press about, yes, we're all about diversity and representation, when they thought that was what Star Trek was and what the audience wanted, and now they've realised that's not. Now they seem to be happy to be doing conservative things, and all of a sudden all the gay characters have disappeared and everything. It just shows that he didn't actually care about any of that stuff. He was just trying to sell a product based on an IP that he's invested his life in. But I'm still talking at 8 minutes. I thought this was going to be a short video. But what do you guys think? I'm curious what people think. But yeah, I'm not watching the episode. Like, I don't want to just to analyze this. Like, I've already done that. I'm just going to leave it where it is, I think. But it is something to sort of think about. And obviously if that's happening, we're going to see it more in future episodes. So yeah, I guess we'll just watch and wait.